and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
Hello, Ann.
Hi. Before we start with the headlines in the show, we want to give you an update on our broadcast situation in Philadelphia. I know you've been following this right at, the edge of your seats. So here's the surprise. WYBE Mind TV, which has been airing us for a lot of years and whom we love and who is going off the air eventually, but not right away. They say they've gotten a brief reprieve. They're going to be on for a few more weeks. They're not even sure how long it's going to last, but you can still see us there temporarily. Meanwhile, we have a new home in Philadelphia. Yay!
Thank you, Ann.
Philly Cam.
And thank you to our viewers in Philadelphia who helped.
Philly Cam is the public access station in Philadelphia, just as we originate at the public access station here in New York, Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We will now be carried by the public access station in Philadelphia, Philly Cam.
But you'll need cable for that. It's not going to be over the air anymore.
Which is why we haven't stopped looking for an over-the-air broadcaster, too. But of course, as Andy always points out, you can always see us online
at gayusatv.org.
But some of you are finding us this week for the first time on Philly Cam, and coincidentally, they've been extremely kind to give us the same time slot where you've always seen us on Mind TV, Saturday nights at 7. So now you can see us simultaneously on several channels Saturday night at 7 in Philly for a little while.
We'll put all this on the website, and of course, if you're on our email list, we'll give you all the details. Go to gayusatv.org and sign up for our email list, and you'll get advisories like this and a preview of each week's program.
Yes, so thank you to Mind TV for all your loyal affiliation for so many years. Thank you to Philly Cam for picking us up. We will have continuous service in Philadelphia, and we'll keep looking for more outlets. Any of you who want to suggest others, wherever you are, please let us know.
Now, here's a preview of this week's program. The big news, of course, was that a federal judge in a landmark decision blocked President Trump's ban on transgender service members. Wait till you hear about this.
Fascinating details. On the other hand, for the transgender community, 2017 is the deadliest year on record in the United States.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the prejudice coming up from the top. Democrats are working to block President Trump's anti-LGBT nominees, and if you can believe it, they are getting even more extreme.
The nominees, not the Democrats.
No.
If only the Democrats would get more extreme,
that's
although
true.
they're pretty helpless with the numbers at this point.
No.
But good news from Missouri, where a judge there has ruled that anti-LGBT discrimination is illegal as sex stereotyping.
Kevin Spacey is finished.
I'll put a question mark on that. Yeah. The U.S. Congress unanimously condemned anti-LGBTQ violence in Chechnya, but our president and our Secretary of State remain silent on the subject.
The state of Ohio's High Court has upheld an HIV criminalization law.
And there are a lot of LGBT movies opening in New York and around the country this week. We'll give you a rundown on some of those.
Okay.
But I think we actually have to start with something. There was a horrible massacre in New York this week.
Right down the block from us.
Yes. I actually was caught in the traffic on the West Side Highway just after it happened. But it's horrible. It's awful. We're tremendously sorry for the people who died and their friends and family. Life goes on, but it is just.
Well, I'm amazed how life is going on. I mean, in the sense that, look, on 9/11, I think the whole country was curled up into a ball. I was certainly lying there crying. I mean, now this has become part of the normal pattern of life, whether it's mass shootings mostly by American men, and then these terror attacks, which are so easy to do and just happen with regularity all over the world now. We live in a culture of tremendous violence.
All over the world, genocides. We'll certainly do a lot of stories this week on violence around the world. The opioid crisis, that comes into our coverage this week too.
And the answer tends to be militarization of all these things and law enforcement things rather than, I mean, look, I'm not trying to be naive about how you make it a better world and that we don't need protections and things, but this particular perpetrator was on the radar of the government. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars on this kind of surveillance, and he got through the system.
Nonetheless, I do not enjoy hearing the president refer to him repeatedly as an animal. I don't think that's the answer.
No.
Excuse me, I'm adjusting our desktop so we don't flip it.
No.
Because it's not nailed down.
No.
So anyway, I wouldn't be happy if we didn't
Trump is certainly
that.
not going to, people are not going to be encouraged to do what we need them to do, which is to report things that they hear and see if the guy at the top is so anti-Muslim that they're worried about themselves.
It's a very dismissive approach that doesn't look at the complexity of the problems, but that is the problem with this president who just speaks in irrational sound bites.
Right.
Meanwhile,
he spoke in an irrational soundbite when he did the transgender ban. He did a tweet, an impulsive tweet. And basically, the federal judge in the case where it's being challenged, her name is Colleen Collar-Cottley, she said this was not a carefully considered solution to an issue. It was just impulsive, and you can't do that. You've got to make some arguments about why you're doing this.
Okay,
it's not just because you're the commander-in-chief.
Quick background: some very right-wing members of Congress, Vicky Hartzler of Missouri and others, wanted to put an amendment into a defense bill that would forbid funding by the Defense Department of trans-related medical care, surgery, hormones, whatever. The House of Representatives, shockingly, defeated that.
With the help of General Mattis, who's our Secretary of Defense.
Absolutely, but Republicans voted against it as well as Democrats.
Yes.
So Vicky Hartzler, Tony Perkins, and others go to the White House and talk to Trump and say, this is horrifying, this is horrible. And Trump, meanwhile, wants to get them to pass a bill that includes funding for the wall between here and Mexico. And so he needs these people on his side to get enough votes for the bill that's going to include that funding. So that's when he writes the tweet that says, all right, no transgender in the military. I'm going to go beyond what these guys want. I'm going to go all the way and say no transgender in the military. And that was the genesis of all of this. And then there was the whole thing about was he actually going to fulfill it? And he kept insisting on it. And so our people started going to court against it. So what this court has done this week is issue a preliminary injunction against Trump's order going into effect, and taken us back to the previous status quo so that trans people can serve in the military. Trans people will be able to enlist in the military as of January 1st. Trans medical care will be paid for because, as she said, as Andy said, there is no rational basis for what he did, and it is discrimination against an identifiable, stigmatized group of people. And you can't do that even in the military without a good reason.
And as we've discussed, I mean, there is generally judicial deference to the commander-in-chief on these things. There's a phrase for it. But there was no study. That's not what he did.
Well, the studies that have been done, there have been a lot of studies that say there is no harm with transgender service. They are all serving honorably and productively. And she said you cannot then turn around and just do this arbitrarily.
Now, they are allowing a proposed ban on federal funds for gender reassessment surgery in the military.
No, but they didn't do that.
They never got there.
They didn't, so it goes back to the way it was,
Status quo.
which is allowing funding of medical care.
We should say these things don't just happen. This case was brought by the National Center for Lesbian Rights and Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, who did a terrific job.
That's the old name for them. They're now the GLBT something.
We'll figure it out, and we'll get back to you.
But the other reason is that, or the other good thing about this is that one of the things she said about this is you issue a preliminary injunction when the people bringing the lawsuits in the first place, because this isn't a final adjudication of this case, this is a preliminary injunction while the lawsuits continue against Trump's order. And what the judge said is, and this injunction says, is that our side is likely to prevail in those lawsuits. So that's why you issue an injunction, because you don't want a bad thing to happen if it's not, if it's going to be overruled in the end.
Right. And I think we should bring up at the top of the show the horrible milestone that we passed in this week, which is that with the murder of Stephanie Montez in Texas, the police there discovered the body of her, and in a Corpus Christi suburb. And she was shot to death, and she is believed to be the 24th transgender person killed this year. And that makes 2017, by statistics, the deadliest year for the trans community on record. Now, again, another reason the statistics are going up is because we're identifying these people. They were often misgendered in reports, and we didn't even know about them.
It's also the vast majority, almost all of these 24 murdered trans women are women of color. It is a massacre and an epidemic of violence and murder against specifically trans women of color, who are more likely to be impoverished, less likely to have jobs, and more likely to be the victims of this violence. By the way, I just, this is going backwards, but I just have to note that the lovely Roy Moore of Alabama, who may very well be elected to the United States Senate.
Unless people vote for Doug Jones.
Said that the judge who issued the preliminary injunction should be impeached.
Yes. Of course, he wasn't impeached. He was just removed as the Chief Justice of Alabama twice for different things.
And lest you think the military is the be-all and end-all of rationality in this, an Air Force colonel in Albuquerque, New Mexico, has been disciplined because he would not sign a certificate of appreciation for the same-sex spouse of a retiring master sergeant.
Well, he's at Kirtland Air Force Base. He's got the religious right, of course, backing him up on this.
Well, the religious right is very...
He said he did it for religious reasons.
The religious right is very strong in the Air Force. Most of the chaplains are evangelicals who have railed against homosexuality for many years. They had a big fight at the Air Force Academy over this. It's a very strong streak in the Air Force, and it's very routine for retiring service members to get these certificates of appreciation for their spouses. And this guy said, no, I'm not doing it because your spouse is of the same gender. And
of course he will have the right to do that if our government prevails at the Supreme Court, because the Justice Department has gotten in on the side of the Masterpiece Cake Shop this week. Now all the amicus briefs were filed this week. Tons of amicus briefs on our side, including from a lot of bakers and wedding planners.
Oral arguments December 5th at the Supreme Court on the Masterpiece Cake Shop case.
But the Trump administration's on the other side, and they are,
well, they're supporting this religious liberty argument.
Aided by the Alliance Defending Freedom, who are going to, our Justice Department is going to stand there with Alliance Defending Freedom, an anti-gay hate group, defending this thing. And folks, again, this has larger ramifications for civil rights laws in this country. If we start making these kinds of exceptions, and people can cite their religion, their moral concerns and things about how they want to treat people who come in off the, for business, it's over.
Well, John Lewis, civil rights hero, signed on to one of these this week and pointed out that he vividly remembers the whites-only signs on businesses.
Because that's what God wanted.
Yes, and that is now what they're trying to impose on gay people in these places.
And anybody, and black people.
But a little good news from Phoenix, Arizona, where a court rejected a lawsuit by a company there, Brush and Nib, that does wedding invitations. They had gone to court to ask for an exemption from the state's non-discrimination law so that they could reject same-sex couples from accessing their business services. And the court said, not only is that inappropriate, but nobody's requested your services, so you don't even have standing to bring this lawsuit.
That's true.
Goodbye.
But in Michigan, where we have no protections unless we are protected by sex discrimination, a same-sex couple was turned away from a wedding venue there, the Post Family Farm, because they said, we don't offer same-sex couples the same services. We don't want to support same-sex marriage. Why don't you find someplace else to have your wedding?
Well, it's an interesting time we're living through where we...
That's a curse
where
in
we
Chinese.
go from... yeah, I know. Where we go from overt epidemic bigotry to people rethinking and changing their attitudes, but there are still many vestiges of unashamed bigotry out there. I've been impressed and moved recently by taking a close look at our allies who are standing up for us and standing up against racism and sexism and everything else. And I appreciate the insight and courage that people are demonstrating in being willing to take that extra step forward to stand up.
Yes.
Thank you.
We would like to see that here, and we will.
We would like to see more of it in the United States Congress. I think we should talk about the Trump appointees.
Well, I mean, we could start with the fact that the LGBT groups have come out against this guy Scott Garrett to head the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Now that was headed by Fred Hochberg, the highest-ranking out-gay official in the administration. This guy Garrett was defeated for Congress last year in New Jersey because of his anti-gay statements. He was withholding money from the Republican Party because they used the money to support a few out-gay Republicans.
Yeah.
And this offended him so much.
And Trump, as we tape on Wednesday, was bragging this morning about all the judges he's getting confirmed, federal judges, 145 approximately,
right,
to district courts and courts of appeals.
All horror shows,
They're
all drawn from
bigots and
right,
horrible people.
I mean, again, this seems to make, there were a handful of Republicans who voted with us on the transgender service thing, but this is not a deal breaker for them. They want these judges because they're so conservative on everything else.
There are a lot of Republican judges who have come out with wonderful decisions supporting civil rights.
Republican judges, but not members of the Federalist Society.
Well, that's my point. In fact, this woman who wrote the trans military judgment was originally appointed by Ronald Reagan to the courts and then elevated to the federal courts by Bill Clinton. And Republican judges, as we have gone through marriage decisions over the last few years and other cases, we have often noted that these judges would,
Sorry, I don't know why I'm sneezing.
You want some?
No, I'm all right. Go ahead.
As many were appointed by Republican presidents as by Democratic. But this is a whole new class of judges that Trump is appointing who are real hardcore right-wingers.
It is a complete disaster, and it will be a disaster for a generation or more.
Yeah.
By the way, this guy Garrett, who was appointed to the Export-Import Bank, doesn't believe that the bank should exist. But that's par for the course in the Trump administration.
Yes.
Jeff Sessions doesn't believe in justice. Scott Pruitt doesn't believe in environmental protection. He heads that. Ben Carson doesn't believe in housing and urban development.
Betsy DeVos doesn't believe in public schools.
And Mike Pence doesn't believe in vice. By the way, it was Paul Manafort who engineered the pick of Mike Pence for vice president.
My favorite story of the week, these indictments that have come down. please let them be only the tip of the iceberg.
A lot of people were rooting for Jared, but that's because, you know,
we have time. He can be gotten. Part of what blew Manafort out of the water, these Brooklyn bloggers. This woman is walking down the street in Brooklyn, and she's a local blogger in her neighborhood, in her community. She writes a little community blog. And she runs into a friend on the street who says, hey, you know who owns that house? Paul Manafort. And the woman says, really? And she starts posting things on her blog because in the middle of all gentrified Park Slope, Brooklyn, this house is a mess. And she's saying, who knows something about this? What's going on? And 2 lawyers take her up on it. They read her little local blog, and they start looking into all the real estate records.
Wow.
And the end of all this is that they discover how he's been laundering money through his real estate ownership for whatever purposes, and they are major whistleblowers on Paul Manafort. It's just another example of grassroots action
we're
being
all
at the
in this
heart of this.
together.
It's not all Robert Mueller, it's sometimes local bloggers in Brooklyn.
By the way, Sam Brownback, who was up for the position of ambassador at large for religious freedom, and he's a total right-wing anti-gay nut. This is one the Senate Democrats are trying to slow down. He was confirmed by committee narrowly. As
was Richard Grinnell, the out gay nominee for ambassador to Germany.
Because of his sexist comments. So you have Republicans voting for the out gay candidate for ambassador to Germany, and the Democrats voting against him because he is so horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
On women.
Yeah.
And then there's Sam Clovis. You might have heard of him this week. Well, he's an anti-LGBT radio host who was tapped to be the top scientist at the Department of Agriculture, despite no expertise as a scientist. And now he's caught up in the Russia scandals because there are several references in the court filings this week about that to the campaign supervisor, and that's Clovis, who served as Trump's national co-chairman. And so
he's in trouble.
He was. They asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders about him, and she said, "I see no reason why we're going to have to withdraw that nomination." I'm betting this one is in trouble.
An old high school friend of mine wrote me a note this week referring to her as Suckabee.
But
I thought that was reasonably clever.
Unanimously approved by Democrats and Republicans was Pete Hoekstra, former representative, for the position of U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, despite his anti-gay history, and he's being sent to the Netherlands, an extremely pro-gay country.
Well, I hope they eat him for lunch.
And we've told you about Penny Nance, who Trump wants to make ambassador on global women's issues. She's from Concerned Women for America. Now, the reason she got in trouble this week, and her nomination may be in some trouble, is because she can't stop tweeting either. And she went after Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, whom she likened to a middle school girl. That might hurt her chances with those guys if they have any self-respect.
Lost long ago. You know, Brownback was asked at his confirmation hearing about LGBT issues because he got rid of a non-discrimination order that Kathleen Sebelius, his predecessor as governor of Kansas, had instituted. And his answer at his confirmation hearing was, well, I just think that's more appropriate for the legislature to take care of. And no one said to him, well, if it had come up in the legislature, would you have supported it?
Well, he also wouldn't answer Tim Kaine when he asked him if religious motivations aren't sufficient justification for foreign laws instituting the death penalty for homosexual acts.
Yeah.
He would not say.
Well, but they don't go after these guys hard enough.
Well, we ought to be running ads on TV about them, et cetera, exposing the kind of extremists that you're getting there.
That requires a level of commitment and money that is not there. Meanwhile, just to be contrary, the Department of State on Intersex Awareness Day issued a statement supporting self-determination for intersex people.
Well, there are still, embassies around the world that are participating in local gay stuff. I mean, they haven't gotten the word to stop yet. But of course, the administration is so inefficient that they're not on top of that. Wait till Sam Brownback gets out there. And let me say something nice about a Republican. I've always spoken up for Joe Strauss, who was the Speaker of the House of the state of Texas. But because he stopped the very horrible bills from going through there.
Not anymore.
But he's not going to run for re-election.
Well, he's one of these guys like, I don't want to compare him to Jeff Flake because he's a lot better than Jeff Flake, but these so-called establishment or moderate Republicans are seeing the writing on the wall and walking away.
But even some of those moderates, if you want to call Jeff Flake, and I wouldn't really. They're very conservative, but they're very conservative. But they've, people are all saying how lovely their speeches are, what they say about Trump is. But they vote against us all the time.
Absolutely.
But
so do Bob Corker and John McCain and
not John McCain all the time.
Not all the time.
On the judges, though, yes.
Yeah.
And then we have some good news from Alabama, where Judge Carlton Reeves, and he's helped us.
Mississippi.
Is it Mississippi? Sorry,
yes.
Mississippi. Right. He has said that the plaintiffs can ask the state for the names of county clerks who have recused themselves from marrying gay couples. And this is part of the challenge to House Bill 1523 down there.
Well, he's reopening the whole case
right.
against 1523 because he had enjoined implementation of the bill, and then a higher court has just removed that injunction. So Reeves says they can reinstitute the lawsuit against HB 1523.
So this is Roberta Kaplan's case, and she says this now gives her clients an opportunity to test whether the religious objections law is actually constitutional.
Well, should we get to Kevin Spacey, just as a little...
Well, we could, couldn't we?
We could.
It was a big story this week, wasn't it?
It was, and you were quite adamant about it.
Well, I've been writing about him for years because I get so offended by him sort of teasing people about who he is and then refusing to talk about it.
Certainly most egregiously at the Tony Awards.
And, P.S., this revelation by Anthony Rapp, which we'll talk about, is not news. And it is news that it's him. But the stories about his abuse of attractive young men on the sets, wherever he is, are legion. My friends, other friends, these aren't just like rumors or gossip. These are people who had these experiences. He grabbed me and he stuck his tongue down my throat. He just thinks he can do this to the young men on the sets because he's a big star.
Kevin Spacey.
They're just peons. They're extras or something. Mm-hmm. And this is the way he operates. So, what Anthony Rapp did this week was extraordinary. He revealed, although he's told the story before without naming Kevin Spacey, that at the age of 14, and we have a picture of him when he was 14, this is him. He's 46 now. He was in a show on Broadway, and Spacey was in another show on Broadway, and Anthony was, in social circles on Broadway, and ended up at a party invited by Spacey to his house with other people, with other adults and things. And he said, I was so bored at the party, I'm a kid, I just went in and watched TV. And then when I was trying to leave, turns out I'm the only one there, and Spacey blocked the door, picked me up like a bridegroom, carries me into the bedroom, and then jumps on top of me and tries to get sexual with me. He said I was able to squirm away. He said, Kevin Spacey was a 26-year-old actor, not very famous, in a smaller role in Long Day's Journey and Tonight. And he said, this kind of haunted me for a long time. But then Spacey started getting famous, and he said it really became uncomfortable for me in the business, knowing what I knew about him, seeing him at gatherings, parties, whatever, and it would kind of freak me out. And then, of course, we all know about Kevin's horrible performance at the Tonys, where he joked about the closet constantly and still never affirmed himself. So,
but what is really upsetting people this week with all of this coming out is Spacey then appending to his apology to Rapp.
He doesn't exactly apologize. He said, I have no memory of this happening, but if it happened, it's horrible, and I'm so sorry.
Well,
I was drunk. I must have been drunk. Well,
Well, rap
going
story.
after a 14-year-old boy
Rap
is not
story.
not an excuse.
Story describes Spacey as possibly drunk.
That's not an excuse.
I'm not saying it's an excuse.
Well,
I'm saying you are casting doubts on his being drunk.
Spacey.
And I'm saying,
No, I'm not casting doubts on his being drunk. I'm casting doubts on whether that's an excuse for sexually assaulting a 14-year-old boy.
Nothing is an excuse for assaulting anybody. But the question in my mind when I first heard about it, because I have not heard or paid attention to perhaps what you said, is was this a one-time incident or is this a repeated thing?
It's his MO.
Okay,
and I am completely, predicting, as with Harvey Weinstein, they're all going to come out of the woodwork, and now just because. Now that Anthony Rapp has spoken up, the brave one, he doesn't have that power anymore.
Well, that would be the traditional progression, but will an added layer of self-loathing by gay men who are concerned about their place in the business prevent some of that?
People are speaking up mostly on behalf of friends of theirs who have been attacked by Spacey. A woman,
not so much themselves.
Recently in England, where he was a very good director of the Old Vic Theatre Company, by the way. A lot of people have respect for his talent, but this was the way he operated all the time. But at the end of all this, Spacey tries to sort of deflect a bit by saying, I have loved and had romantic encounters with men throughout my life, and I choose now to live as a gay man. Oh, now you try to do
it. Really? Now?
I want to deal with this honestly and openly, and that starts with examining my own behavior. Well, I have yet to hear from him, that he acted this way for decades. I'm not saying with boys, with underage boys. I'm saying with men on his sets. And is he sorry for that?
Well, certainly Harvey Weinstein isn't.
And more gay men are more gay men like out gay actor Jason Dotley, who was in the Sordid Lives series of all things. I mean, he talks about the way he was abused by a Warner Brothers executive, et cetera. He said that his first agent asked to meet him at his apartment when he was 19 with his penis out. And then these are the kinds of things that a lot of these attractive young guys...
That wasn't Spacey, that was the agent.
This is, this is Jason Dotley talking about other people. Yeah. So I think some gay people are starting to come out about these things, and that's good.
All right, should we move on?
Yes.
How about elections coming up? Next week is election.
Big elections in Virginia.
Yes, the governor of Virginia, a very tight race between the Republican and the Democrat, and out trans candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates, Danica Rome. That's a big election, running against a virulent bigot who is running very anti-trans ads against her. Kathy Woolard is running for mayor of Atlanta.
Out lesbian.
Yep. And of course, Roy Moore running for senator in Alabama.
He is not gay. That we know of. Maybe.
Well, one of his campaign pronouncements was that the Obergefell marriage decision was worse than the pro-slavery Dred Scott decision.
Oh, yes. This is what they say.
And he, of course, is against trans people serving in the military or having access to bathrooms. But if you want to find out about LGBT candidates running in your local area, now Roy Moore's election is until December, by the way.
December the 12th, because it's a special election to replace Jeff Sessions.
But all the regular elections are next week on November 7th. Go to victoryfund.org to see what's going on in your area and who your local candidates might be. We have that film, but I don't think we have time for it at the moment. If we have time at the end of the show, we'll do it.
We will run it.
Or we'll put it in the note, link in the note.
About the problems in New York.
Yes, with the rebel Democrats who are siding with Republicans.
I wouldn't call them rebels. I'd call them traitors.
Treason is a term coming up a lot in the Trump administration.
It has a very specific meaning in the Constitution.
Meanwhile, the sitting politicians in Pennsylvania in the Senate went ahead and passed the renewal of the child health insurance program with the anti-trans amendment included that we told you about last week that forbids any use of these funds to help trans kids with any kind of counseling, medical treatment, whatever.
Can't the pro-LGBT governor veto this?
I don't know. I don't know whether he wants to. I don't know what's going to happen to it in the House, but we will stay in touch on this.
Okay. All right. In we had a little victory in Lansing, Michigan, where the mother of a fifth grader, transgender son, won the right for him to use the restroom consistent with his gender identity. The school board went along with that, but the local anti-LGBT activists are trying to fight that.
Fresno, California is where we have followed the case of the school board president who is an overt and unashamed bigot who objects to any anti-bullying or pro-LGBT education.
Yep.
Well, surprise, surprise, in his area in Fresno, an out lesbian, Logan Pruneda, was pelted with slurs and juice boxes on her 16th birthday at school. And in an atmosphere, there she is, in an atmosphere like that with the school board president telling you you're not worth anything, it is not a surprise that the students would take their cue from that.
And then there is the case of Ramiro Huerta, 41, of Strathmore, California.
Ramiro, I think.
Sorry?
Ramiro, you said Ramiro.
Ramiro, sorry. He's filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Tulane County Sheriff's Office because he...
Tulare.
Tulare, yeah. Tulare County Sheriff. Sorry, I'm a little fatoots today.
We're going to think you're like Trump.
That's right. He was slurring his words.
Yeah.
That's an encouraging sign with him. But he complained about some suspicious activity, and then the sheriff's office wouldn't respond, so he complained about them. So they came to his door to beat him up and started using anti-gay slurs. And
they really beat him up.
Did we show the picture there of there he is? That's what they did to him.
Yeah.
So they took him to a detention facility, held him for 10 hours, released him.
This is because he complained that the cops had not responded to his call about suspicious activity around his house.
And they released him in the morning without charges being filed. But, you know, the lawsuit is about putting an end to the good old boy culture there.
They also entrapped him. They fooled him. You know, he put in the call. They didn't come. He complained. Then they come. He won't let them in the house because he sees that they're angry and they're after him. So they go away. So he goes out to lock the gate. And they've been hiding in the bushes, and they come out and attack him.
Yep. That's outrageous.
Ugh.
All right. In Kentucky, taxpayers are going to have to foot the bill in the Kim Davis case. The judge ordered it, David Bunning, in the case. She's not going to have to pay, but the state is going to have to pay $223,000 to the attorneys of the people who complained about her not doing her job.
And the judge in Kentucky who refused to consider adoptions by same-sex couples and wanted a religious exemption for that is going to resign to avoid being disciplined for his bigotry.
In Puerto Rico, incendiary devices were thrown into the local gay club Circo Bar in San Juan on Saturday. The devices did not cause significant damages to the club, and there were no arrests, and the motives are unclear there. But it looks like a hate crime. In
the midst of everything that Puerto Rico is going through, to then gin up the hate and energy to start throwing incendiary devices at a dance club seems unbelievable. Good news from Arizona, where a tribal court has ordered the Akchin tribe to recognize same-sex marriages.
They say they have a fundamental right to marry under the Constitution of the community and the Indian Civil Rights Act of 1868.
Good news from Ferndale, Michigan, where the city council has added a permanent rainbow flag to the city council chambers.
That's nice.
How nice to go to your city council and find that. displayed. And good news from Marietta, Georgia, where young Bennett Stone, 10 years old, he was assigned a class project to do something, and he decided that he wanted to write nice notes to transgender people.
Well, he read about how mistreated transgender people are, and he decided to do something. We remember a Boy Scout, a kid who got involved with the whole gay issue in the Scouts. We had him on the show 100 years ago to talk about that. So he coordinated a campaign of writing encouraging notes to transgender students. And it's very sweet and it's very brave. And it was picked up as a larger project by Georgia Equality, that we all do this and send encouragement.
Yes.
Well,
so thank you, Bennett.
I went to a hearing on school bullying, a lot of it which is anti-LGBT this week, and it's this went on for 6 hours, this hearing, and I have to say I'm not encouraged. I mean, in terms of the kinds of measures that need to be taken that are going to get this thing under control, but there are additional steps that are going to be taken in New York in the wake of the kid being bullied in the Bronx. They seem
so superficial. They seem so, lip service.
Well, it's about legally covering their asses, and they keep passing policies, and they say we have all this in place, but you've got to go in there and change school cultures.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's good for everybody.
It wasn't so hard when we were going into schools and talking to classes of kids. We had innumerable kids start off a 45-minute session saying that their favorite sport was going and beating up queer people. And 45 minutes later, they were saying maybe that's not such a good idea.
And Danny Drum, who's the out-gay head of the education committee who headed this, was emphatic that to the chancellor and others, you need to articulate LGBT issues in the schools. You need to say the words. We were in there breaking silence about these things in those days, but there's still a lot of silence around it.
Of course.
Well,
except that, one bright note in this, a bill written by students in New York City passed the Council Education Committee. It promotes more GSAs, which used to be gay straight alliances. Now that's defined as gender sexuality alliance clubs and training of staff.
Good.
We'll see whether that does any good.
On the other hand, there's a bad way to talk about this. There's a professor at Genesco, New York's part of State University of New York, named David Sorbello. He gave a quiz that used transphobic language. He was asking the students to pick out who were the females and who were the she-males as he put their pictures up during this class. He says that he got the idea from RuPaul's Drag Race, but this got him into some trouble. Geneseo, sorry. I'm making a lot of mistakes today, but it's good to have Ann here.
Well, I just want you to get the right information. It's not a
No, I appreciate it. I'm saying I appreciate it.
No, I want that too.
Then there's the head of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, which is a 234-year-old fraternal organization. In New York, they said they don't admit women, though they may admit transgender men, but they haven't given it a lot of thought. The Philly chapter admits women.
Don't think too hard.
No.
In Missouri, good news, a federal court ruled in favor of a transgender plaintiff who was complaining about employment discrimination. And the court said that is...
A three-judge panel.
Said that was based on sex stereotyping and was illegal, and upheld the employment rights of trans and all LGBT people not to be discriminated against. In West Virginia, a local Big Brothers Big Sisters organization announced that they had lost funding because they gave a grant to support LGBT youth, and 3 other funders pulled out of funding their organization. Wow. Did you watch the HRC dinner?
No.
I did.
Why don't you tell me about it?
It was on C-SPAN.
Wasn't President Clinton there? No. Hillary Clinton was there.
Well, Khizr Khan was probably the most moving, talking about... He was very supportive of
He's the Gold Star father who was attacked by Trump. Yeah.
And he made a particular point of attacking trans people in the military. His son was killed as a soldier.
You mean supporting trans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that what I said?
I thought you said attack, but okay.
Maybe I did. I need correcting.
Okay.
Anyway, he was supporting trans people in the military, and he's famous as the father of a soldier who was killed in the military. And very straightforward and moving and emphatic. I thought Hillary's speech was an attempt to be emphatically supportive, but didn't break any new ground. Kamala Harris talked about we have to tell the truth.
She's the senator from California who's being touted for 2020.
Yeah, and she was relaxed and good and appealing, but none of it was really groundbreaking. And meanwhile, the people who were protesting Pride events last summer, let's see if I can find it, the No Justice, No Pride people, they showed up outside the dinner saying, what are you doing allowing Wells Fargo to sponsor this event? You've sold out to the corporate interests for no good reason. So there was some, none of that showed up on C-SPAN.
I protested at HRC dinner when they had Rudy Giuliani as a speaker, you know. But in general, I think we should be focusing most of our energy on, we should certainly try to improve ourselves. Most of our energy, we ought to be focused on the other side.
Hillary did say silence equals death. Giuliani was just involved in these indictments. He was mentioned as having supported, I don't know, Papadopoulos or someone, and I thought, oh, excellent. But
we didn't like our mayor.
No. All right, shall we move on to international news finally?
Well, where things are really dire. I mean, the situation in Egypt is getting even worse in terms of what they're doing to gay people. We've told you a lot about that. They now want to make perverted sexual relations between people of the same sex punishable up to 5 years in prison. They don't have an anti-sodomy law. They persecute gay people on other bases, and they want to make, you can get 3 years under the proposal that they put up if you attend a gay party or carry any sign or code for homosexuals. I mean,
like a rainbow flag.
This is insane, and you know, we're trying to get Tillerson to speak out against it, but he's not doing it. And he's not speaking out against what's going on in Chechnya. Neither is the president. But the Congress unanimously condemned anti-LGBTQ violence in Chechnya. The Congress. Where's Vicky Hastert when you need her?
Hartzler. But meanwhile, Russia and Egypt have banded together at the UN to demand removal of their non-discrimination Principle 6 from the Olympic truce resolution. Yeah. Every time they hold an Olympics, all the countries of the world sign a truce resolution, which is nonsense, by the way. And there aren't any wars actually going on halt during that, but this is their little lip service to that. But when the Sochi Olympics were held, we did such a good job of raising LGBT discrimination issues around Russia that they added a non-discrimination principle to the next Olympics. Well, now Russia and Egypt want that gotten rid of for their as their price for participating in the Olympics. We'll see whether the Olympic Committee or the UN supports them or stands up for us, and what happens with the Olympics.
Lots of news from Taiwan. Did I say that right? Taiwan. The premier there is going to send his own version of a same-sex marriage bill to the legislature before the end of the current session.
Maybe. He hopes to.
Tens of thousands of people marched through Taipei in the
yeah,
Pride.
Look at that, like 120,000
wow,
in Taipei. And sex education was the theme of the Pride Parade this year.
And the president of the country also took to Facebook to express her best wishes for the Pride Parade.
Well, you know, the deal with the marriage thing is that a court issue, or the Council of Grand Justice or whatever, in March of this year said you have to do marriage, you have to do it within 2 years or it's going to go into effect automatically. And so they've been arguing since then, and everybody wants them to do, the legislature to do it faster. That's why they keep saying, okay, we're going to come up with a bill, but no one is confident they're actually going to get anything done before the 2-year deadline.
And the United States took part in that parade.
In Taiwan, I would think so.
Yes.
And
well, I mean,
in
as a
Hong
country, even
Kong,
under this heinous administration.
well, that's true. In Hong Kong, they have the 4th LGBT Pink Dot Festival, which is what they also call it in Singapore, which also was huge. Thousands of people, corporations, diplomats participating. And the interesting thing there is that the Gay Games have just announced that they're going to be in Hong Kong in 2022, 5 years from now. Next year, 2018, the Gay Games will be in Paris. But Hong Kong in 2022, you know, Hong Kong is supposed to be a fabulous place, but China now rules Hong Kong and has been cracking down on stuff. So whether we can hold a successful Gay Games in Hong Kong even 5 years from now will be interesting to see.
Yes. Two of the European Union agencies are in London. And of course, with Brexit, they're going to have to relocate these agencies somewhere else because they're not going to be part. And the gay employees are very concerned about going to a country that doesn't recognize same-sex marriages. So Slovakia, which doesn't have same-sex marriage, says they recognize their relationships. But Poland says we don't have to.
We're following the Australian marriage postcard vote. Results will be announced on November 15th. But meanwhile, the right wing, which I think expects to lose that postcard vote.
Postal vote, because it's still a private ballot. You don't send a postcard back.
You don't?
That would reveal your vote if it was on a postcard.
I don't know. At any rate, the right wing is gearing up to fight it in Parliament because there's going to be a lot of pressure for Parliament to pass marriage equality if we win the postal vote. So they have already announced 100 religious and free speech exemptions that they want to impose on any marriage equality bill.
It sounds like it would almost be better to wait for a new parliament before voting on a bill if that's the kind of crap that they're going to pass.
Well, they may get it soon since several of their members have been disqualified as having dual citizenship and being illegal members of parliament.
Staying over in that part of the world, the New Zealand Prime Minister who we told you about was sworn in, and Jacinda Ardern, and she would not take her oath of office on a Bible. She did it on, which was a positive thing. And then in Bristol, England, so two guys were at a bar and they were being abused outside there. And this guy, Ben Stokes, who's a very prominent cricketer, came to their defense when they were being hurled with homophobic abuse. And he got arrested for getting involved in a fight, but he was just defending them.
In Goa, India, they had their first Pride Parade and a film festival. And back in the UK, the country has denied asylum for a gay Moroccan man, 25 years old, who has HIV. He, in Morocco, was getting assaulted and getting death threats. And the UK asylum adjudicator said, well, that's not persecution, that's just routine harassment.
Also in the United Kingdom, they're having a huge sexual harassment scandal with the Tory party and some Labour people as well. There's a big list going around. And in India, the High Court has asked the Navy to reconsider alternate job for a transgender sailor who was sacked.
Moving on and speeding up. In AIDS news, watch out on this opioid crisis thing. First, you should all read last week's New Yorker for the article on the Sackler family who invented oxycodone for Purdue Pharma, which is their privately held company. It is horrendous. They just completely lied to everyone for years about the potential addictive properties of these drugs.
They're drug pushers, they got a lot of people addicted, and a lot of people are dying.
So Trump's answer is just say no, and let's do a big ad campaign. Refused to call it a national emergency, called it a public health emergency.
But by doing that, well, the only thing that he did do was free up the states to take away money from AIDS programs and put it towards, if you want to put it towards the opioid epidemic, you can. I don't really care. I don't really care about anything.
In Indiana, a second county has now ended the needle exchange program that Pence allowed to be instituted over his dead body because so many people were dying of, were contracting HIV because they were using needles for opioid addiction.
And sadly, the Ohio Supreme Court has upheld the constitutionality of a law requiring HIV-infected individuals to tell sexual partners of their status before having sex or risk criminal charges. Now, this may be appealed to the Supreme Court. Likely will be.
Entertainment news. All right, I want to alert you to some movies. Dreamboat, which is a documentary about a gay cruise and got very good reviews, playing at the New Fest LGBT Film Festival here, is opening at the Quad here in New York this weekend and probably around the country.
And our own Chris Cooper, our movie reviewer, is recommending God's Own Country, which I believe is set in Britain, is it? Yes, Northern England. And it's, you know, it's about some sort of a Brokeback Mountain type story of a sort. And he thinks it was a joy and a privilege to see it. Liked it very much. And his full review will be on. There's a picture of them.
No dress code required about the fight for marriage equality in Mexico, which our friend Rex Walkner highly recommends, is opening in New York this weekend and beyond.
And Ryan Murphy's making a new
Pose.
Yes, well, the largest cast of transgender actors in series regular roles ever for a scripted series.
It's a story about New York in the 80s. There is a transgender co-executive producer, co-writers, consultants, directors, and all the actors. The pilot is shooting this month in New York. It's not picked up yet, but could be. Disney TV's series Andy Mack is going to have a gay storyline, a tween, Cyrus, figuring out he's gay. I saw a screening of Rebels on Point, the story of the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo.
Yes.
It's terrific. It's a great history
These
of
are
the
men
troupe.
dressing up in tutus and
they are dancers. They're there to dance.
But they're satirists in
It's
the way they dance.
comic ballet, but it's real ballet,
Yes.
and it's a fascinating story. A popular singer-songwriter, Teddy Geiger, has announced he is transitioning to be a trans woman. And the Golden State Warriors basketball coach, Steve Kerr, who's always been very supportive and who refused to go to the White House, he and his team, after they won the championship, he is they held an LGBTQ night at the Warriors opening season opener, and he gave a wonderful statement supporting diversity and the LGBTQ community.
Or as Trump calls it, diversity.
Well, we kind of did that today with our
We did a little bit. We were slurring our words. Well, we didn't get to the New York video about what the politics problem here, but we will in the future, because this is an issue for this coming year in 2018, and we'll tell you how you can make a difference in New York if you're from here.
And Philadelphia viewers, sign on to our website at gayusatv.org to get our newsletter. We are now on PhillyCam in Philadelphia, and still on Mind TV for a few more weeks. We'll see you everywhere. And back here next week.